If you want to see a movie about true, sacrificial love, I recommend Adrian Lyne's Unfaithful. That's what I'm going to tell you about today. My opinion will be at the end of the video. In the suburbs of New York lives the model family of Edward and Connie Sumner and their 8-year-old son Charlie. Their 11-year marriage is full of love, but it is a little monotonous and lacks passion. Connie is a middle-aged woman, a housewife who lives with her family's problems and worries. Connie gets her child ready for school and her husband ready for work. She organizes holidays for the family, prepares breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Her husband Edward is a successful businessman. He is only interested in making money and doing his business. The most important thing for him is that the family should not need anything. It all looks too sweet and monotonous. Duty phrases with his son and wife, duty kiss on the cheek before leaving for work. One day, Connie goes to New York City. The city is raging with bad weather. A fragile woman is carrying packages. A strong wind knocks her down, and the damn cab drivers won't stop. At some point, a young guy Paul Martel shows up. Connie runs into him. Caught in an awkward situation, they both begin to collect each other's belongings. Connie asks the young man to help stop the cab, but all attempts are unsuccessful. Seeing that the woman has scratched her knees, the gallant Frenchman offers Connie to go up to his apartment to treat her wounds. She hesitates, but the guy looks so charming that the heroine can't resist. Here she learns that the young man is 27 years old. He lives in the apartment of an acquaintance and sells books. Connie treated her wounds. After a kind conversation, Paul Martel gives her a book. It is a souvenir of such an amusing acquaintance. In the evening, she tells her husband what happened to her. That a young man helped her. Edward offers to thank him by sending him a bottle of inexpensive wine. The next day, Connie finds his phone number in the book Martel gave her. It's a good trick, isn't it? Connie goes to town by car. Thinks for a long time and finally calls Martel. She wants to get his address so she can thank him and send him a little present. But the guy doesn't even let her finish speaking and invites her to his place. She finds herself once again in his apartment, and here we see the mutual attraction to each other. The young guy shows her Braille and tries to seduce her. However, at the most responsible moment, Connie says it's time for her to go. On the way home, she stops by Edward's workplace. She gives him a sweatshirt and tells him that she has decided to do auctions. At home, in the evening, Edward notices that Connie is very thoughtful. The next day we see her come to Paul. They dance together and the guy seduces her again. At one point Connie says she made a mistake. Connie leaves, then comes right back and says she forgot her coat. At which point they both throw themselves at each other. We see Connie return home. She feels great guilt and shame about the betrayal, but at the same time great joy. Because this is exactly what she lacked in her marriage. Passion and thrills. In the evening she tells her husband, as usual, that she loves him, the standard confession. Connie then begins to see her lover more and more often. She even gives him a souvenir that her husband once gave her. For Connie, playing on two fronts becomes like an obsession, and her long-forgotten emotions come over her. Now she is successful in intimate life with her lover. Successful in married life with her husband. There will be a lot of spoilers next. If you want to see the movie in its entirety, follow the link from the description. One day Paul takes her to a restaurant for lunch. There, Connie says she shouldn't be here with him. At the next table, two men are arguing about who will pay the bill. And Paul says if the one on the left pays, they stay. The situation does not turn out to be in Connie's favor, and the person who paid the bill turns out to be a colleague of Edward's. As time passes, the husband begins to notice changes in his wife's behavior. At first Connie rejects Edward when he shows her affection and tenderness, and later he notices that his wife has bought beautiful lingerie and new shoes. Edward asks her to meet him for lunch, but she says she has an appointment at a beauty salon. Suspicious of his wife, Edward calls the salon and is convinced that Connie has lied to him. In the meantime, Connie is on her way to Martel's once again, and at the most inopportune moment, right outside her lover's doorway, she meets some old girlfriends. They entice Connie to have coffee with them, and before she can think of an excuse, she is forced to go to the cafe. Connie calls Martel and tells him that she is in the cafe across the street and will be at his place a little later. He doesn't hesitate long, goes to the establishment and starts embarrassing her. A little later, they engage in an intimate activity right in the toilet of the cafe. It's a very comical situation, because Connie's girlfriends spotted Martel at the bar. One of them said she would love to be with such a handsome man, while the other, on the other hand, recounted her personal experience when such a little affair ruined her family. By a great coincidence, Edward gets into a little trouble, work-related. Because of the same Bill who saw Connie with Martel. In a small confrontation, Bill tells him to keep a better eye on his family. This leads Edward, once again, to suspicion. As a result, he turns to a private detective and asks him to start following his wife. In the evening at dinner, Edward informs his wife that he is leaving for another city for work the next day, and will be absent for 24 hours. Connie successfully takes advantage of this and spends all day with her lover, all the while getting caught on camera by private investigator Frank Wallace. As Martel's visits become more frequent and longer, she is late to pick up Charlie from school. Connie realizes that she can no longer continue this relationship. She attempts to end her relationship with the gallant Frenchman. However, at this point she is hindered by her son Charlie. Meanwhile, Connie's husband is dating Frank. Edward is completely devastated when the private investigator provides pictures of Connie and Paul together. The married woman realizes that her adventures must stop. She decides to tell Martel in person and goes to him. On the way, she sees Paul running away from the rain into the library with some woman. She jumps out of the car and runs straight to them. Realizing that she may not be the only one with the young Frenchman, he may have had several affairs. She attacks the girl. A little later, while in the elevator alone with Paul, she asks him, how many women like her does he have? But Paul avoids answering the question and tells Connie that the other woman is just a friend and nothing more. Then she tells Martel that she doesn't want to see him anymore and mentions that their affair is over. However, when she runs out of Paul's apartment, he manages to stop Connie. He presses her against the wall and begins to seduce her. At first, Connie tries to resist Paul's advances, but eventually she gives in. And they again engage in intimate acts right in the hallway of his apartment. Leaving her lover, Connie almost runs into her husband right at the entranceway. He has arrived to fight Paul for his love. After a while, Edward comes up and knocks on Paul's door. Eventually, Martel lets him into his apartment. The young Frenchman talks about how his wife Connie has shared his worries with him, how she is bored with her marriage, how she lacks passion and is tired of living in the suburbs. The deluded husband looks around. He asks ticklish questions, sees the bed where it all happened. He is literally stunned to discover the snow globe he gave his wife in the past, which, as Paul explains, Connie gave him. Edward goes into a state of frenzy and kills the Frenchman with a glass ball in one fell swoop. And then all the fun begins. While cleaning up the evidence, the phone rings. And his wife sobs and leaves a message for Paul. In it, she says that she is tired of lying and hurting her family and that she is sorry, but must put an end to this affair forever. He erases the message. Wrapped the body in a rug, he takes it out of the apartment and puts it in the trunk of his car. Afterwards, Edward goes to see his son perform in the school theater. He washes the evidence off himself in the school's bathroom along the way. At night, Edward goes to the junkyard, where he disposes of Paul Martel's body. And then we see him tormented by memories of the young man's murder. NYPD detectives arrive at Connie and Edward's house. They ask Connie if she knows Paul Martel. They report that they found her phone number on his desk in the apartment and that he is missing. The police reported him missing. His family does not know where he is. He was reported missing by Martel's wife, who, as it turns out, lives separately. Connie says she barely knew him. She wanted to buy a couple of books from him, and that was it. When the detectives leave, Connie gets rid of the book Martel gave her. A week later, the police arrive at their house again. They report that Paul's body has been found at the dump. Edward and the detectives notice that Connie is suddenly distraught upon hearing the news. Connie begins to lie that she met Polly at music school. This, to her surprise, is confirmed by Edward himself. When asked by police officers if she had ever been to the SoHo neighborhood where Paul lived, she says she had never been there. But detectives are charging her with a parking ticket she received 4 weeks ago, right outside the D where Martel lived. To this, Connie evasively says that she had coffee with her friends. Edward asks the detectives to stop pressuring his wife and says they told them everything they knew. Then asks them to leave. A few days later, Connie finds pictures from Detective Frank Wallace in Edward's belongings. She realizes that her husband knew about her cheating. And a little later, she notices that the glass ball she gave to her lover has returned to their collection. Sharing a meaningful look with Edward, she realizes that he killed Paul Martel. Later, Connie asks Edward to tell her what he did to Paul. To which Edward says that he knew about her cheating. He gave up everything for his family. And she ruined it all in one day. He says he wanted to kill her instead of Martel. Later, a very interesting moment occurs. Connie finds a love note from Edward, in the very glass ball she once gave Paul. Their family photo with baby Charlie. The photo was supposed to fall into Connie's hands, supposedly on their silver wedding anniversary. When Connie burns the found pictures of her and Paul, Edward says he will turn himself in to the police. But Connie objects, saying that they will find a way to move on, they can return to a normal life together. In the last moment of the film, we are shown Edward pulling over at a red light and Charlie sleeping in the back seat. Connie whispers that they may leave the country. They will change names and start a new life. They will raise Charlie together and live by the ocean for the rest of their lives. Edward comforts her as she cries. And then we see that Edward has stopped the car outside the police station. In the end, curiosity was the first stepping stone to infidelity. And infidelity is like death, it knows no nuances. And it all led to 4 broken lives. This movie is the strongest story about infidelity, a story about passion, about sin, and about forgiveness. What do you think of this story?